we'll give a couple minutes for others to join us. But we're also going to keep this session to an hour to allow people to jump to their next probably back-to-back Zoom call. But we wanted to make sure that because we had so many questions for this session, we wanted to give as much time as possible, but we'll try and be very mindful from that perspective. From a time check at the moment, just making sure that we give people maybe one more minute to join. But what I'd love to do is, yes, thank you, Faye, for putting a message in the chat. We won't be able to go around the whole room to see the industry groups that have joined for the discussion, but if you want to put your name, where you're from, what company you represent in the chat, I think that could be a good way for everybody to get to see who's joining us today from a discussion set. If you're one of the speakers, please keep your cameras on. If you are joining us as an attendee, if you could turn off your camera and put yourself on mute, we are happy to bring you back in and turn on your camera when you guys like to ask a question, maybe later on in the session. So I think from that perspective, we should be good from a housekeeping item. And we do hold these sessions every month. I did want to give just an update to the group that our next session is going to be pre-recorded because we're actually going to get some expertise on CDR coming in from Australia, and therefore the time zones don't work well, but we will still release it on April, I believe it's April 13th. So if you guys are set for that, we will release it at the same time. And then you could still have some questions. The session after that, we're actually planning to do something just before Payments Canada event that Carlos is helping us as one of the OFNC volunteers to organize as kind of a little gathering just before, the night before PayCan goes to kick off, and we'll send more details when we have them on that one. And the following session, we're actually going to be holding at a credit union event that is happening with one of our members, which is, if everybody knows, League Data, and many other credit unions have got together in Eastern Canada to have a credit union event that we will be presenting in person, and that will be our June event. So some in-persons coming your way, and we do push this into people's calendars on a monthly basis. So we hope that you join to our next discussions. But to kick us off, really excited to have everybody here for our March session. These industry discussions are really for us to try and bring to you more insights from around the world, what's happening in open banking, open finance, what questions do you have, and how can we drive more insights to help the market move faster in Canada, because we're seeing such great global growth with the UK moving to 7 million consumers, and Nigeria announcing that they're launching open banking imminently, in other countries as well. So really excited for global progress and hoping for faster Canadian progress. Today's session is actually the first session I think I've ever seen on trying to look deep into the innovation that open finance can drive for accounting infrastructure. And to have this discussion today, I'm so excited to have Faye, who is the head of Xero, to be our expert speaker, as well as Cindy, who is from BLG. Cindy Zhang is our OFNC board advisor and has been with OFNC since the beginning, since we wrote our 99-page manifesto. So I'm excited to hand the mic over to Cindy to introduce Faye and get the session started.
I'm sorry, my dog has decided to bark at the mail delivery guy, so I hope it's okay. Okay, he stopped. Can you hear, Faye, can you hear that?
It's all good. It's making it more exciting.
Now I'm blushing and I see that. Well, it is our absolute pleasure to have Faye Pang as the Canada Country Manager for Xero join us today. It is a global business platform dedicated to making business beautiful. Faye is responsible for the go-to-market strategy and the team in Canada, and is helping to drive the adoption of cloud accounting across the country. Prior to joining the organization, Faye worked for Uber, where she was part of the small team that launched the Uber Eats app in Toronto in 2015 as a global first, scaled the business from 80 restaurants on launch to 20,000 partners and a $1 billion run rate business by the end of her tenure at Uber. She's passionate. She's a passionate champion for diversity and inclusion in the workplace. I am proudly to say that I echo the same values. She was the very first person to take mat leave at Uber Canada, and upon her return, she became the lead for the global parents at Uber Employee Resource Group. And at Xero, Faye is the executive sponsor for the America's Indigenous Employee Resource Group. We are so happy to have Faye join us today and share her insights and views on SMEs and the integration and the possibilities of accounting infrastructure and services in an open finance network in Canada.
Thank you so much for having me, Cindy. And yeah, love hearing your dog in the background. Some more of that. All good.
My apologies. So I think, are we going to jump right into discussion today, Michelle? Sorry if I missed that. Did I lose someone?
She might have stepped away. But yeah, why don't we jump into the questions?
Okay, great. Well, right before we did receive already questions from the audience, but I just wanted to kick off first about, if you could tell us a little bit more about your organization and its focus and its business focus, infrastructure, and maybe the reasons why.
Yeah, let me expand a little bit more on Xero first for anyone on the line who maybe hasn't heard of it, because we're still a growing brand here in Canada. As was mentioned in the bio, Xero was founded 16 years ago in Wellington, New Zealand. And one of the unique things about Xero, it was built in the cloud, right? So 16 years ago, our founder, Rod Drury, had this vision. He was running his own small business. He was literally sending floppy disks of data to his accountant that would be outdated by the time they arrived at their home. And he said, there's got to be a better way, right? I want to have real-time collaboration with my accountant. I want to be able to have a better handle on my books. And there's this thing called the cloud, which I believe we can use to actually create this single source of truth, this single ledger that we can collaborate on together in real time. And so from those humble beginnings, 16 years later, we now serve over 3.5 million subscribers around the world. We are the #1 player in markets like New Zealand and Australia, where in fact 1 in 5 Aussies gets paid through Xero payroll. So that's how ubiquitous we are as an accounting platform, and fast becoming #1 in the UK as well. And so you might be thinking, well, accounting as a platform, like how core could that be? It is the heart and soul of a business, right? Like being on top of your numbers, having visibility to your cash flow, being able to quickly spin up financial statements for purposes of access to capital or lenders. That's huge for a small business. And today, particularly in Canada, takes so much time and effort. So one of the things that we are really excited about in the Canadian market is cloud adoption for small businesses is less than 15% today, right? So less than 15% of Canadian SMEs are doing their accounting in the cloud. That number is north of 65% in those established markets that I mentioned earlier. So what that means is there's a productivity and an efficiency gap for Canadian SMEs where they're still doing a lot of things in spreadsheets, right? Using pen and paper on really outdated technology. So we talk about things like open banking and then open finance. There's just a massive opportunity to give small businesses efficiency, to give them back time, to help them have better, more real-time insights into how they're doing. And in a world for small businesses where that 5-year failure rate is 50-50, it's a coin toss. Are you going to make it to 5 years? Every little bit helps in terms of better understanding their finances and moving them from surviving to thriving. So that's kind of the background behind Xero. We're really passionate about helping small businesses, and fundamentally our mission is making life more beautiful for their small business owners, but their advisors, so accountants and bookkeepers. And ultimately by doing that, we believe we can make communities more vibrant and thriving.
What are the Just for the benefit of folks who have not attended the past couple of industry sessions, just to level set for the room today, is what are
Yeah.
some of the, I guess, structural hurdles to for the Canadian market or infrastructure
Yeah.
for Xero today or before today to obtain the same sort of I guess fluidity of service provisions in the other markets that you named?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's that the question one that you've got on the slide is a good one to start with, right? We are still, our CEO came to Canada 6 months ago and he said, Faye, you're like 10 years behind. And he meant that in a really earnest way around, wow, people are still writing checks and you don't have solid bank feed information that flows seamlessly into accounting software. So when we talk about some of the challenges that Canadian SMEs are facing, I think it's number one, there's still an opportunity for more of them to be connected to an accountant or bookkeeper who's that professional, right? One of the challenges for small business owners is they're notoriously bad at valuing their time. And so even if they're doing something like, I don't really love it, I'm not great at it, but I just can't be bothered to move out of Microsoft Excel as an example, it's really difficult, but really leveraging accountants and bookkeepers. Number two is their time poor, right? Like, how do you give them back more time? They're spending so much of it on manual, onerous tasks. And that feeds into number three for me, which is today, the number one challenge that we hear from our accountants, bookkeepers, and small businesses is our bank feeds are not consistent. Michelle and I talked about this about a month ago when we were together, which is it's really, really challenging in a world where we don't have open banking, let alone open finance, to be able to say, hey, what's in my bank account today? Give me the transaction data in a seamless, reliable, consistent way so that I can pull that into my accounting platform and actually understand, reconcile on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis, fulfill my tax obligations, and then do reporting and cash flow insights and ratio calculations. That is so not today.
Now,
So not having open
so
banking is a big blocker.
Totally. And in Canada, what do you say to that when someone says at a business says, I want you to pull all my data, my banking data to do those things? For Xero right now, is the answer, well, we can't?
Yeah.
Right.
It's not, right? So like most of our competition, I see a question here from Andy, who's your competition? Like we, in the cloud space, right? It's Intuit as a competitor, Sage as a competitor. But if I'm really honest with you, Mandy, our competition is Microsoft Excel and the status quo, right? Most people are not using cloud technology. Most small businesses are not using cloud technology today. And then to answer your question, Cindy, like, most providers in Canada today, 99% of the data shared is screen scraped. It's credential sharing, right? So it's accessing that consumer's own data through a third party, which is constantly coming up against, understandably, sort of restrictions from financial institutions and MFA requirements on all of these things. So there's fundamentally a gap at the moment with what the consumer is asking for, right? Which is, hey, I just want to have my own data pulled into from this system into this other system that I'm also paying for, and they just cannot do it today. So to describe to you what that experience feels like is they might use a third-party provider, such as Plaid or MX or Yodlee, what have you, and then they're going to try to connect their bank account, and 6 times out of 10 that'll work. 4 times out of 10, it's going to be really painful, right? So that's the level of consistency that we're seeing today, and it's because the default is credential sharing, and I mean everyone in the system acknowledges that is far from ideal.
Far from ideal because and I sound like a broken record maybe by now, but far from ideal because the a deposit holder, an account holder, or customer of an account, an FI account, whether that be a bank or credit union, what have you, would be breaching their own service agreement when they share these credentials, right, under the requirements 100%. To keep things secure, like your checkbooks and all the rest. And also that there is no, there's just no statutory right at this time for Canada broadly to compel, I guess, I think that's a strong word, but to compel or to require financial services providers or content holders and data holders to share that information once an individual makes that request. And we're seeing that change hopefully in Bill 64, but that's only in Quebec. And that consumer-directed consumer data portability right is coming into force this September 2023, but only in Quebec for now. And the rest is in,
Yeah, and I think it's to me, it's a bit of a conundrum in the sense that if, and I'm going to tell a story that might make some of the folks from financial institutions toes curl on the call, but like what we're hearing from some of our accounting partners is, listen, my clients are so frustrated, right? They trust me. They want to be able to have me reconcile their books. They want to be able to have me, produce reports for them on a regular basis. And so they're so frustrated with the lack of their ability to connect their bank account data into Xero that they literally have a box on their table with bank cards and passwords on them, right? Like that is what they've gotten to because their clients have said, I just don't want you to keep bugging me. If you're connecting my bank feed, I don't need to know. I just need to know what the end product is. And so, use this. Like, and I trust me, I realize like how shocking that is, but it's because the current system is not serving what the customer needs.
Totally, totally. Well, now we talked about the hurdles. Let's move on to some of the opportunities.
Yeah, let's get more positive.
Yeah, let's get more positive. What can this
for
open?
sure. And there are lots of great opportunities, right? When we talk about what is the possibility, the art of the possible with open finance as it relates to SMEs. And luckily, from a Xero perspective, we're a global organization, right? So we were able to see this across the UK, Australia, New Zealand, where we're already seeing significant SME uptake in their open banking systems. Right? And I think Canada has an opportunity to learn from those other markets on what works and what drives value. So from my perspective, there are three major opportunities in this space. The first one is we can really help drive efficiency. I talked earlier about giving small business owners back time. The efficiency piece is sort of critical to that. And it's also the buzzword du jour today, right? Because everyone is looking at how they can make their business more efficient. Number two is solving the cash crunch, right? And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the third one is in a world where small business owners are truly time poor, and that is their most valuable resource, I believe open finance can give them time back. So let me talk about each of those in turn. Efficiency specifically, just to share some data with the group, in June 2022, we had 370,000 Xero small business customers with an active open banking bank feed in the UK, right? And research from that implementation entity shows that within small business adopters of open banking, they saw some pretty remarkable results. So those who adopted open banking, 84% said that they were able to manage their business more efficiently. 79% said they had a more reliable, secure backup of their financial data, right? And then another 79% of them said they were making better business decisions. So when we talk about how you can drive efficiency through systems enabled by open finance, those are the numbers that give me a lot of optimism around, well, we'll take those productivity gains in Canada, right? The small business network will certainly sign up for those. So there's the financial insights that you can garner through consumer-driven finance, I think are really powerful to transform how small businesses are operating today. And that's all to me around efficiency and to some extent effectiveness. The second point is around the cash crunch, right? We know cash is king for small businesses, particularly during times like we're experiencing today. Growth capital continually comes up in our research as a big issue for Canadian SMEs, and the current economic climate is only making things worse. Here at Xero, we actually use something called Xero Small Business Insights. So it's anonymized and aggregated data that we pull from Xero customers to be able to pull out things like sales growth. And one of the things that we've seen in the most recent quarter in Canada is that SME sales growth has slowed to a 19-month low. So if you actually take inflation into account, it's 3.5 points lower year over year, right? So we're actually going backwards given the current macroeconomic context. And then if you take that and you couple it with things like increasing invoice payment times, right, which we're seeing, and then late payments, which we affectionately refer to as unauthorized loans from small businesses, you see this cash crunch start to form, right? And small businesses are really suffering as a result of that. So organizations like BDC can help bridge that financing gap, but they certainly can't do it all. And open banking can help up for these critical times to really make sure that we're getting cash into the hands of small businesses.
I just want to iterate a little bit more about this cash crunch, right? On that side, I just read, I was at a talk yesterday where the head of the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses shared a stat for Canadian companies that we are most of the majority, and I can't remember exactly the numbers, but the majority of independent businesses and SMEs are not at the level, have not regained the level of revenue and profit from what it was before the pandemic, and that's the majority, and that's 3 years now. So to add to this cash crunch, something I will let you finish your remarks, but the other point I wanted to just talk about is how do SMEs weigh their choices of which service is worth the investment especially in this economic climate, and which ones should they just forego.
I think it's a great point, Cindy, right? Like what we're hearing from our small business customers is that they're having to make those tough decisions, right? And they're having to look at discretionary spend and really ask themselves the hard questions around, is this going to generate more profitability, more efficiency? And is this something that I can put off instead? So just the decision-making around that is really quite challenging at the moment.
And you had a third point before I
Yeah, it was just the thing to round out on this question was just around giving folks time back, right? Again, that is the most valuable resource for most small business owners. So automating as much of this process as possible, allowing one service that you pay for over here to talk to another service that you pay for over there, connect seamlessly, to integrate. One of the things that we say here at Xero is data flow, not data entry, right? So if I can save that manual time and allow those two systems within my personal financial ecosystem talk to one another and work well with one another, you're going to give me back hours in my week, which I can spend working on my business, right? So that is the number one thing that I would say in all of this is, yes, it's efficiency, ultimately it's time, and that should come together to equal like more productivity and greater output.
Right. Only because you mentioned with the question out of the chat about your competitors, and you said Microsoft Excel, there are also, more like I'm thinking Google spreadsheets and things like that. That are heavily, I know, heavily used by independent, small owners, independent businesses, and what are your thoughts on those? I mean, it's being used a lot. So what are your thoughts on that compared to, what else automated services like Xero can offer?
Yeah, and I think, so to be very honest with you, like our research shows that a spreadsheet is status quo in Canada for most small businesses. And it would be really shocking, I think, for small businesses in places like New Zealand and Australia and the UK, where cloud penetration is higher. There's, much higher uptake and again, more open banking regulation in place, to see that Canadian small businesses are actually operating this way. And when you ask a Canadian small business owner, well, you're doing this in Google Sheets, or you're doing this in Microsoft Excel, like, why? There's so many more tools. The answer is typically, well, it ain't broke, right? Like, this works. I know it's not great, but I've been doing it this way for years. And I can't, there's not someone used the word compel. I'm not compelled to change. And what we've seen in a lot of those other markets is that regulation does drive change or encourages it, right? When you can really unlock the value of the technology by leveraging things like open banking to be a force multiplier for the benefit that a customer will receive, that's when you can compel people to change. When you put in requirements for small businesses like e-payroll and single touch payroll in Australia, that's what compels small business owners to change. So it's just a function of tech adoption. And one of the things that we, not to cite another Xero study that we do, is it's called the one-step report. And so we did a one-step report here in Canada with hundreds of Canadian small business owners to say, what is holding you back from adopting technology, right? And a couple of things that came out. One was analysis paralysis. There's just so many options.
Yes.
I don't know where to start, right?
How do they decide?
Exactly. How do I decide, and how do I know what I want? And then another piece was just, there's so many different places that I think in my business are suboptimal. Where do I even start? Is it with my accounting software? Is it with my timesheet and scheduling? Is it with my payroll, right? Is it with my customer POS system? So just, there's so much tech out there, can be understandably really overwhelming for small business owners. So that's what the one-step report showed us, was that tech change is hard. And at the end of the day, it's a mindset shift, right? Which is what we are going through in Canada today.
Well, it's almost, I mean, in a way, I run like I run a business in the sense that it's my practice, and I have,
Sure.
support on the billing side, payroll, and coordinators on, comm side into business development. And if I had to do the billing on my own and invoicing, that takes me 2 weeks out of every month. Right. And I'm not I'm not legally practicing law anymore
Yeah.
with the majority of my time, which is my value. So that's my, value in the little microcosmic business I just, I'm talking about here. I know already if I had to do invoicing or billing or accounting, it's just not, it's not going
It
to be
wouldn't
a
happen.
sufficient business,
Right.
right? That's worth paying the team of people to do that for me. If you're in a smaller, model, I think the question is, is it worth kind of outsourcing? I don't know if I'm using the right word, but outsourcing this to someone that is more efficient, that is automated. It may be that if you have a person in house already, which I don't know if they normally do, would
Mhm.
something like Xero replace that person, or like in accounting, or is it
No,
that
the best
in
way to
debt?
think about Xero, no, the best way to think about Xero is it's a tool, right? And it's a tool best placed in the hands of a professional. So one of the things that we say all the time is we actually want to have small business owners move away from a DIY or do it yourself mentality to a DIT or do it together, right? Like
Okay.
you are really good at law. That's what you should focus on. That's where your time is best spent, right? Not on the accounting side of things. So bringing in someone who is a professional in that space, if you actually do the math, is often well worth the investment of, great, that's going to be make me X% more efficient, or I can take the 2 hours a week or whatever I spend on trying to reconcile my books and spend it on higher order level revenue generating things, right? Just small business owners are not typically, as I mentioned earlier, very good at valuing their time. And to build on your point, right, like you as a small business owner don't have a digital roadmap, right? Oftentimes these are small teams, you're just trying to keep your head above water and execute on your core business. So the last thing you're thinking about is the digital roadmap and where accounting software fits in on that. It's not really about transformational thinking. It's really about short-term decisions and optimization. And that's been particularly true over the last few years.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's helpful. And well, we talked a little bit about, already the opportunities. You talked a little bit about the challenges. But I want just to, I'm hoping you can share a little bit about, let's say, once open banking is a thing, is regulated, there's a framework, it's implemented in Canada. Can we benefit from lessons learned in other jurisdictions that you've seen in terms of any challenges with adopting? I know from my side, in our efforts to to have these discussions, I hear a lot from consumers that there's a lack of understanding. And then if we have a lack of understanding from consumers, not SMEs, I just know from consumers, and they don't adopt it because they don't understand it, then we can't justify basically the market. Not to be too dramatic about it, but is that one of the was that one of the lessons or frictions to adopting open finance in other jurisdictions, or were there other challenges that you saw and that we can learn from?
Yeah, absolutely. I think education is a huge piece of it for both consumers and small businesses. I think in some ways the small business education piece might actually be easier because there's so many really clear pain points and use cases that we can point to even today that will not need a lot of articulation to be top of mind and understood by small business owners. But when we look at other jurisdictions, I'd say there's a few things to call out here. One is what I mentioned earlier through the one-step report, like that familiarity with the tech, investing time upfront to save time long-term is not a natural equation for a lot of people. So how you articulate that, how you communicate it, how you show the value to get folks to lean in, to get folks to take that first step is really, really important. And time again, what we've seen is the biggest human barrier for adopting to new technology is the psychological one, right? It's people being change adverse and hesitant to change. When we look at the one-step results, there are really 12 different barriers for small business owners to adopt tech. It's decision paralysis, right? What I mentioned earlier, avoiding decision regret. Oh gosh, I don't want to make the wrong choice and then regret it. And then the hassle factor, right? Again, back to spreadsheets. These work for me now. I don't want to try something new. It's just going to be so much more work. As humans, we're constantly changing. And it's important to push ourselves and try new things, which is why in this research, we also talked about some of the tools that help small businesses and their advisors overcome these mindset barriers, right? So we think that's really important, is the psychological element of change and being really clear on what's the pain point you're solving, and then how is this change going to help with that. So
Okay.
yeah, that's probably the theme that I would communicate from other jurisdictions.
That's helpful. I mean, practical, right? And identify the problem first, but before then soliciting a solution. Not here are all the solutions and not knowing what
for
the problem
sure.
is in the
Yeah,
beginning.
focus on the pain, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Pain for profit.
Yeah.
I wanted to just, we have had a few questions come in from our attendees separately before the session. I don't know if you received those, so I may
Yeah,
be.
I've got them. Yeah.
Oh, and we have so many questions. Let's start with Boopenders in the group chat. Has
Sure.
Xero integrated with open banking or finance APIs globally? Okay, a technical question. What impact did it have on customer experience and features?
Yeah, so absolutely, and I'll use maybe the UK as an example, where today Xero is one of the biggest consumers of the UK open banking API. So we have almost 1 million Xero customers in the UK market, and I mentioned some of these stats up front, but the impact was pretty incredible, right? In terms of efficiency that was driven in terms of them feeling like they had a handle on their finances, in terms of them feeling like they have just a better sense of their cash flow. And I would say the data in is just one step, right? After that, you put it into a system like Xero. And one thing I didn't mention off the top is we actually have 1,000+ apps that are integrated into the Xero ecosystem. So once you get it into that core general ledger, once you get into Xero, you can start plugging a bunch of other things on top of it. And what we saw through COVID was those folks in the UK that were actually connected to 5 or more apps had better revenue growth than those that weren't. They were more resilient. They lost fewer jobs. So it's just really interesting when you think about tech adoption enablement, facilitating better, faster decision-making, and ultimately that being correlated with better business outcomes.
Okay, so 5 apps you say that the business
5 or yeah,
kind
5
of the mark.
yeah,
5 or more.
5 or more apps. Yeah.
Okay, and then we see some good results, good outcomes. And I see from is the next one from Jennifer Jarvis. Can you articulate the limitations of open banking for SMEs in Canada? Okay, limitations of, where does open banking benefit? Where does it fall short? Hence why and this question is towards with a view to open finance in the future, because we don't have open banking yet.
Step 1 first, and then step 2. I would say, listen, we're pretty deeply involved with the FData group here in Canada, and so we're really quite close to the conversations. The short answer is that open banking is not a silver bullet, right? And particularly given, understandably, the initial wave and initial focus has been on the consumer. One thing that we are really passionate about is expanding the benefits to small businesses as soon as possible, because we've seen it in other jurisdictions, right? And what we've seen in other jurisdictions is that SMEs disproportionately benefit from an open banking regime, right? Because those use cases were so clear, because they're generally so underserved. And so the implementation timeline that we're seeing is going to be long. And that's probably what makes me a little bit nervous when we think about open banking, Jennifer, is that it's going to take us some time to truly see the benefit and to address the pain that I mentioned off the top. And then the other question I would...
Sorry. Faye, when you say SMEs disproportionately benefit from open banking, compared to whom? Compared to
the consumer. The consumer, right? So if you think about the initial, no worries. If you think about the initial focus, right, it's been on the consumer. And one thing that we would advocate for is thinking as broadly as we can and expanding as quickly as we can to also encompass the small business community. Yeah.
And from Mandy, do you see the wealth management segment in major banks becoming target clients once open banking is normalized?
Mandy, I'm not sure if I understand the question. Target clients for Xero?
Yes, sorry about that. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, just in terms of open banking, the banks are obviously, you know, a little hesitant. But I see the wealth management, having worked within that segment with advisors, as being real beneficiaries of Xero. And I'm just wondering if, you know, there would be an opportunity to have that segment as a target market at some point once it becomes normalized.
Gotcha. Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, I understand the question now. I think so. Listen, I can share with you some of the conversations that we've had with financial institutions in Canada, which is kind of goes back to our objectives are really aligned, right? If you think about, so I'll share a stat with you. We did some research a few years ago, and I mentioned the 50-50. So 50% of small businesses at that time were surviving beyond 5 years, but that number jumped to 80% when they were using Xero in concert with an accountant or bookkeeper. So what that data showed us was, hey, like you're increasing your chances of success by being connected in, having a better handle on your numbers, and leveraging a professional like an accountant or a bookkeeper. That's really interesting if you think about it to a financial institution where the LTV of their customer all of a sudden shoots up because they're around for longer, right? They're better able to repay loans. They're growing, so they're going to need access to capital. So when you think about a regime like open banking and the benefit that it's going to provide, not just to small businesses, but to the financial institutions that serve them, think about things like two-way data flow, right? So how much better could a bank's decision-making be on a loan if they have access to the ledger, right? If they have access to financial statements, if they know how many folks are on payroll and how often that payroll is being made, right? So those are just some of the things to think about in terms of what's the reciprocal value for financial institutions in this world of open finance where data is flowing freely and a small business owner can, with the click of a button, share that with their bank and say, hey, here are my latest financial statements, or here's my latest P&L. Those are things that are not easy to produce today, not real time. And so that's where I think, yeah, I mean, they all become targets basically is the short answer to you, Mandy, which is, yeah, we can start to really better serve those customers because all of a sudden we have a much richer data set.
Awesome. I think I wanted to go back to the second part of Jennifer's question was where does open banking fall short? Open banking benefits for SMEs fall short, and hence the case for why open finance and with a view toward open data would cover those shortfalls.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably is an extension of the way I just answered that last question, which is it's still just a small subset of the data that a small business has. So if you think about what are the incremental benefits of open finance beyond that, it's now you can start to pull in all of these other elements and all these other different ways to measure the health and the needs of a small business, right? Now you've got all this other data from their connected technology and service providers and employees and all of this stuff that you can actually start to use and say, okay, I'm making better decisions. And the small business owner is going to have more access to financial tools and products that are going to support them in their growth.
Okay, cash is king and data is power, I guess.
Yeah, maybe data is queen.
Data is queen. Love it. Michelle Windsor, I see you've unmuted. I wanted to just open the floor to you if you wanted to share something.
I didn't know I unmuted.
Okay.
I haven't touched my computer, so I'm good.
Well, we hear you crystal clear.
Hi, Michelle.
Okay. Well, there were a few questions from the floor as well from our attendees, and if anybody wants to chime in, please. This is again a discussion and a roundtable. So, and as you can see, Faye is very comfortable with being interrupted by me with no warning. So I appreciate that. Someone has asked. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in and just ask a question as well. My apologies, I couldn't get off mute earlier on the chat, but it's such a great chat. I didn't want to interrupt either. So many phenomenal insights. Thank you so much, Faye, for the window into opportunity that we see that's happening in other markets, and considering there's 2 million Canadian small businesses, the true opportunity to free up time to have better certainty. I think when you said that 80% versus 50% being able to survive the 5-year mark, knowing that we're looking at a roadmap where open banking, consumer only, read only is potentially going to come later the fall of this year. But there is no roadmap to the date when SMEs are going to be embedded into that opportunity set. Do you have any ideas based on, Canada's one of the only markets that's not forced regulatory wise to jump into this. So your other markets as Xero were, okay, the UK is moving to open banking. Let's get in it. Australia, open data. Let's jump into it. So we're in a different market, right? How do we champion the benefits, like to what you said, that SMEs actually have a better benefit set than consumers based on the time they're going to save, the insights they're going to gather, the longevity of profit. How do we champion this very important point to get to the roadmap faster? Because I don't know that there's been a ton of discussions to level this up.
I wish I had the answer to that question, because it's a great one. And we've, to be honest, racking our brain, right? Like, obviously we have been, as I mentioned, very active with FData Group and various other groups and trying to advocate for small businesses and trying to take the global perspective that we have and we're privileged to have here at Xero and apply it into Canada. But it's a challenging one, right? I do think it is about showing the data from other markets. I do think it is about showing and telling the stories of those small business owners and how that feels today. But I certainly don't have the one answer on that front. It's we know small businesses in Canada are really underserved. And the challenge that we have is, how do we surface that? How do we, again, pain is the thing that really resonates. So how do we surface those pain points, show the productivity gains that can be had, and get it included in the conversation? So something that me and my team are really trying to push forward.
Faye, I am going to jump in just with a question. So one of the things that we've seen is that from an accounting software perspective, a lot of the people, whether they're Excel, they use it for forecasting, all those lovely tools that we all rely on, including paper. And then there's a lot of desktop app-based stuff. So it doesn't give the full connectivity of a cloud experience, right? So we actually have some pretty high stats on the desktop, but they don't even upgrade those desktop apps. So how do you bridge that to bring them into the cloud so that they can leverage some of those data? And then the second part of it that we run across is, it's the age-old problem of quality of data coming in versus out. And how do we work together as a community to solve that so that the experience, as it has that connected, upgraded into cloud, and then start to work with third-party providers, is a little cleaner and controlled? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love the questions on this chat, because they're the same ones we ask ourselves internally. But we've done a bunch of research in the space, right? I mentioned that as a market and as a small business community, Canada is very cloud immature today. And so one of the things that our team is really focused on is, honestly, why cloud? Like, that message of what are the benefits of cloud? And what you find is that there's still a lot of outdated notions around things like security, right? Like, and people not really understanding the advancements that have been made in this area, people not understanding what the foregone benefits that they don't have access to today in terms of being able to manage their business from their phone, right, anytime they want, and having that automatically update right back in to their laptop. And so things of that nature we're kind of going back to basics when we talk about marketing and the messaging that we're putting out to our small business prospects, because it is really truly why cloud and what's the benefit that's in it for me. So we're kind of still at that stage, which I know is really shocking for a lot of folks, but that's what the data is showing us in Canada, is we're at that stage. To answer your second question, 100%, right? And open banking for us is, as I'm sure it is for a lot of folks on this call, not moving fast enough. So we have our favorite term here at Xero is, what's the workaround, right? How are we going to put tools into place to make this just a little bit more elegant, a little bit more seamless for customers? And so I'll specifically mention a product that we recently launched here at Xero called HubDoc bank statement extraction. So what this tool is, it's leveraging the best in breed technology from today to actually allow folks to upload a PDF statement, a PDF of their bank statement, or to take a scanned picture of that bank statement. And by uploading it into a product that we own called HubDoc, they're actually able to leverage the technology in HubDoc to read that bank statement very quickly within a matter of minutes, and then export that into Xero in a Xero-friendly CSV file that allows you to quickly reconcile all of those transactions inside of Xero and start to manipulate it within the accounting platform to create things like reports, to create things like insights, to do things like cash flow projections. So that is very much a stopgap solution in the interim before open banking, but it's innovation that we've had to push out because our customers have said, hey, the status quo is just really not cutting it. We love using Xero, but our data, the data fidelity coming in is not great. What tools can you give us to make that a little bit easier?
So I find that really interesting, and actually, so it's like screen scraping as a workaround to fix the connectivity that's been put into place from that you sign up with your banks and the screen scraping solutions through some of those other integrators, right? So we talk in this group, and anybody that's at a bank, that is fundamentally an issue, that we have to create a product to screen scrape, to take bank data from a statement, to have it come in so you can trust it more fully than doing your direct connect to your bank through the integrations that some of these accounting softwares offer. For me, I'd really be interested in thoughts on that, because I find that interesting that that's the type of tech that we have to invest in order to get around it.
Yeah, my thoughts on it, it's hugely inefficient, right? And so just the length of time it took you to describe that process, which is accurate, is to me like unacceptable if we think about wanting to create a strong, healthy, productive small business economy in Canada. So that level of inefficiency, that level of like broken telephone, just to get to what today is actually still a pretty poor output in terms of data quality and accuracy, is not acceptable. And so that's why, open banking is so important. That's why open finance is so important, because that is an accurate representation of the situation today. And it's part of the reason we talk about why aren't small businesses adopting. It's like, in that instance, what is the point, right? Like, I'm not really fully leveraging the power of a product like Xero because it is so hacky to get the input in based on the system that we have set up around it.
So I'm wondering
I'll just end on a positive note if I can, because I feel like I was really negative there. There is a light, right? Like, yes, open banking can help. Bilateral agreements and partnerships are also really important. And so this year, we're really proud to announce a partnership with BMO, right? Where for the business banking account, we actually now do have that integration, right? And so it's things like that where, hey, for certain accounts, for certain customers, we are making headway. Again, though, it is not particularly efficient to do that across the entire board, right? So ultimately, an open banking regime is going to enable that to be true for every business owner, whether you're banking with BMO or you're banking with, ATB, right? So I think that needs to be considered, as there are folks that are willing to partner today and doing really good work in this space, and we're excited to build with them, but is unfortunately like few and far between.
This discussion is kind of circling one of the questions we received from the group, is how do we prepare if Canada has not yet released standards? So that's the question. I think, what we can draw from that, the context here is the Xero ecosystem works with Xero. I'm wondering if without, statutory standards, right now we have a few standards, right? We have the CIO Strategy Council, or I think they've changed their name to Digital ID Governance Committee, has a technical standard for open finance and open banking, which many of our members, myself included, was part of that technical drafting committee. But without, those are voluntary. So without mandatory standards, can all these systems work and operate, and the data, interoperate with the 5 other apps that an SME should have to see good results?
Yeah, and the way I read this question is from a small business lens, so I'll answer it in that way, but it might apply to others as well. Like, how do you prepare? I mean, to your point, right, in the absence of true, complete interoperability, I think learning the tech on its own is a no regrets decision, right? Learning how to use a product like Xero on its own is not is not going to harm you in the future. It's just going to get that much more powerful when you can start to feed data in really seamlessly. So learning the tech, setting a change management plan, depending on the size of your organization, going back to what we know holds folks back from successfully adopting technology. Think about that digital roadmap. It doesn't need to be like, oh. I think someone
Thank
just
you,
came
Eyal.
off mute.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry about that.
No.
Open banking makes me very happy. That's all.
Oh my gosh, I loved the
Great
musical
tune.
interlude. Thank you. So just thinking about a digital roadmap and a plan, right? How are you going to implement this? How are you going to bring your employees along? Is there something that you could do in the interim just to start scaling them up? I've shared on this call, like we're still in the why cloud phase for small businesses, right? So just because you might be tech savvy doesn't mean your team is. So start to bring them along on that journey such that when these things come into place, the adoption and then therefore the extraction of value becomes that much faster for you as a small business.
Right. Okay. And then because you've mentioned a few other things like, you know, your partner bilateral agreements between FI and financial institutions and your recent partnership with Beyo, there was a question that came up.
Yeah.
Sorry. There's an interest in the implementation phase of open banking within top Canadian financial institutions. So maybe, I mean, I know what I've seen in terms of bilateral agreements, but perhaps we can talk a little bit about that just to give a flavor to this person who asked the question. Again, the question is, sorry, my dog interrupted. I am interested in the implementation phase of open banking within top Canadian financial institutions.
And sorry, is the question like, how are they progressing against that? Or what is my take on how they're progressing against it?
You know, in the absence of commentary from perhaps the person who submitted the question,
yeah,
I would take this question however way you want. Well, how would I think
they're looking for an update. I think they're trying to grasp.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's what I think. So we're talking sharing. Well, there are bilateral agreements among FIs
yes,
and between FIs and financial technology providers as well. And I know that's top, like large Canadian banks have in-house open banking departments or open banking heads, so they are looking into this in their own respect. If there's anything you want to add to that, Faye.
Yeah, I would say, and listen, we've had great conversations all around. So what I could say is that this is obviously something that everyone is keenly aware of. I think most folks, not all, but most are probably taking a wait and see approach, right? So they've stood up, stood up teams, and they're actively participating in conversations and consultations. But frankly, until the regulations come out and until the standards are set, I don't know if we should expect to see a ton of action, right? Because no one wants to move too far ahead of where they think things are going to land, is my general, like, maybe 10,000 foot view comment on that question.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's fair. And making, again, it's like, it's kind of similar to a decision that an SME has to make, right? And what's new systems to invest in and which ones to just, you know, and obviously there's an education component to that as well, and a learning phase. So with the time we have left, there is a question, there are two more questions I really want to talk about, and they're very different. So the other one is, how are other initiatives, and I guess in Canada, would impact SME accounting and open finance? And an example of this was the real-time rail. I don't know if you have been following that development. Okay.
Sure.
Do you think real-time rail, or how do you think real-time rail would impact it? I think it works in many ways in tandem with the open banking, you know, implications in a way in the results, but I want to hear more from you.
Super similar. And in this case, it's probably just a little bit more surgical in terms of cash flow, right? And efficiency. So if you think about things like payments today, accounts payable and accounts receivable for most small businesses is still pretty manual, still pretty painful. We've got a wonderful partner and app in our Xero ecosystem called Pluto, actually a Toronto-based fintech that's doing really, really well. And their whole value prop is, hey, plug us into your accounting platform like a Xero, and we'll help you automate your AP and AR, right? So tools like that help folks get paid faster with less overhead, make that more seamless. those are just critical efficiency unlocks in addition to critical cash flow unlocks. So yeah, super excited for real-time rails when that
Yeah.
comes.
And what I'm looking out for is when, the correct, like the applicable legislation is out that allows the real-time rail access model to open up to non-financial institution, like non-traditional FI chartered banks and members to access the real-time rail, right, directly.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing I'll add here, maybe to like take the question up a level too, in terms of like what else might government do? We've talked a lot today about change management and helping Canadian small businesses prepare for that. So if you think about any other government programs that could feed into that, think about the Canada Digital Adoption Program, right? The DAP, like things like that. We're putting money into helping small businesses be more tech savvy, build digital roadmaps, help them adopt the benefits of technology faster. Those are all things that will be net positives and truly unlock the value of things like open banking, open finance, and real-time rail. Totally.
And then speaking of unlocking value, leveling the playing field, and those key phrases, the last question is a very broad one. It's how do we strive for actual equity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the world.
In the world.
No, I listen, this question is near and dear to my heart. So I'll just share a bit of a personal story if possible. Like when my parents immigrated here to Canada from China, they opened their own business and they ran that business for 23 years. Part of my why in joining Xero 2.5 years ago was believing that the technology that we build every day would help someone like my parents, because my mom was a bookkeeper with no bookkeeping experience, and she would literally keep track of all their expenses in a paper ledger book. And because English was their second language, they had a hell of a time trying to walk into a bank and get access to capital, despite running a very successful, largely cash-based business. So when I think about this question, it is about the democratization of opportunity through technology, right? If we can get small businesses leveraging technology and using that to go out and try and get access to capital, or using that in trying to build their business and understand their business better. I think that is like a really great tool to drive equity and equal opportunity in the Canadian market.
Thank you. That's a fantastic, it's a very lovely perspective, a very important perspective. Those are the questions I had, but I do see one more from Mandy in the chat. Do you see system integration partners as a lever to amplify Xero brand? They have specific SME teams and are always looking for innovation to bring to their customers. Might be another way to amplify your brand to scale.
Yeah, love that. And yeah, certainly
and thank
something
you to your parents.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's absolutely something that we have explored and continue to explore. So it's a great suggestion, Mandy. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much. I want to keep us on time. That was such a lovely, impactful, insightful discussion on everything that's happening on Xero's global progress with markets that have moved faster than us. Some of those stats are really important, and we'll definitely get them to the group as well if they weren't able to write them down at the beginning. Cindy, thank you so much for moderating and really driving so many different questions in such an eloquent way. And thank you so much, Faye, for honestly all of the heartfelt insights from your parents and why you joined Xero and why you're so passionate about small business. Because when I look at this as a business owner myself, spending probably 2 to 10 hours a month closing my books, because I do download my bills and upload them through HubDocs so I don't have to give my password to 15 different platforms. I hope for a future with open finance, and I hope for that 2 million small business owners that are spending 4 million hours or 10 million hours on accounting to get down to 1. And so that we could be more innovative and have this country grow in revenue, in small business longevity, based on all of your great stats on profitability. So we're so thankful for this time, your session today, and thank you for your passion and pushing the industry forward.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and it was really nice to have that conversation with you, Cindy.
pleasure was mine. I was along for the ride. Thank you for your patience. I don't know a lot of technical stuff, so I really do appreciate when our speakers are patient with me and my questions.
You nailed it. Okay, thanks everyone.
Take care now.
Thanks so much. Thanks for all the audience questions. Have a lovely day, guys. We'll share this recording. Thanks, Dale, for your musical jump in.
You are very welcome, Michelle.